Get set. Record.
Hello Katie, this is how you do it. Right, these are your ingredients. Zoom in, Alice. Black treacle, sourdough, we'll come to that in a moment, salt, water, bowl, scales, flour and some seeds. You can do it with just the flour and that's all you, and you don't need the seeds. The seeds are just a bit extra. Right, so first of all, you bung in your flour. You make it up to the weight with seeds. That's poppy seeds, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds and linseed. All optional extras. Right, and the total weight's going to be 450, 513, well, I'll send it to you, 514.
Any of those numbers.
Any of those numbers. Just ask Alice what the numbers are, she'll remember them. Right, so that's your flour, then you want just ordinary salt, 10 grams. Then your water. So I think it's about 320 mils. We'll send you the measurements. This is your sourdough. It's just come out of the fridge, but it's still bubbling because we had it out this morning. So it's just gooey and runny. There's all sorts of stuff in the books about how it's got to be the right quantities, but you don't have to worry about that, just as long as it's like that. Okay. And then you just, zoom in Alice, you just dollop a load in. That's enough, like that. So just about that amount. Then, your black treacle.
I didn't know about the black tree.
There's a lot you don't know, Alice.
Thanks.
And that's it. And then you just mix all of those ingredients together. So they take a little while to come together. Zoom in, Alice. You can see it's really wet and quite difficult to, you can't imagine you could work with that. You can imagine it'll be very hard to shape into a loaf because it's still so wet. Now, depending on what flour you buy and what flour you use, and the wetness of your sourdough starter, the dough will be either a little bit too wet or a little bit too dry. Now, this is very wet, so I'm just going to add a little bit more. I'm sort of doing this by eye, but I'll keep an eye on the measurements so that we can send you what those actually were. That's another 40 grams. You can see that's a bit drier now, a little bit more sticky. Now, although I seem to have been quite careless, you need to stick to the weight, so stick within within about 20 grams of flour of the figures we'll send through. So that's now a sourdough loaf that just needs to be left to rise. And it will take a couple of days. The brown breads and granary breads take a little bit longer, and the rise depends entirely on the temperature in the room and the temperature of the water when you start. I use some quite warm water from the tap. It will depend on the flour and the yeast or the starter and the health of those when you start. So I just leave them like that. We cover it up so the bugs don't get in. It's got enough bugs in it already. And then just put that on the side. Now, a couple of times a day, I'll just stir it up again. I'll mix it all up and mix it into the middle. Now I'm just going to show you the sourdough bit. So this is a sourdough starter, and all it is water and flour. And the flour is strong bread flour. And when you've used some, you just put some more into the bowl, into the jar. So I'm just going to bung a bit more in. I haven't bothered weighing it because it doesn't matter, because we just need it to have that kind of gloopy consistency.
Constituency.
So it's all by eye. Just mix it all up. You zoom in, Alice. That's quite wet, but that looks all right. And we'll leave that on the side. So don't forget, it came out of the fridge, so it was cold when it came out. I'm just going to leave that on the fridge, and we'll come back and look at that in a little while.
On the fridge?
And it was in the fridge.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do is just leave it on the side now, and then we'll come back to it in an hour or two and have a look at it, and it will have all bubbled up. So now, to get your sourdough to start, all you do is mix some flour and water until to that sort of consistency. Mix it up. It won't be stringy and glutinous like that. It will just be a sort of floury sludge. And what you do is you just leave that with the lid off on a windowsill, and yeast in the flour or yeast in the atmosphere will settle on the flour, and it will start to grow into a sourdough. That can take 3 or 4 or 5 days, depending on the level of contamination in the flour and how clean your kitchen is and what temperature the kitchen is and all sorts of things. But there's a cunning cheat that you can do, which is just put, if you've got some bread flour, bread yeast, just put a 1/4 teaspoon or 1/2 teaspoon of bread yeast into that mix and mix it up. And the purists would say, well, that's not sourdough then because you've used it from a starter. But actually, once it's started, you don't put any more yeast in, you don't put any sugar in or anything else. So you just have flour and water in there, and that will last. This one's lasted for a year or two. It will just last forever. So you use it, you top it up, if it needs topping up, if you're nearly running out, and then you just leave it to warm and to start. And that's how you make sourdough. It's as simple as that. So making the very first sourdough can take a few days. So you might prefer to just put a bit of yeast in, and that will make a sourdough starter, which then over time, any residual shop bought yeast that was in there will have been lost, of course, and it will just be the ongoing sourdough yeast.
How long after you make it, if you put yeast in, can you use it?
About 4 or 5 days. It might
So
take 4 or
if you
5.
add shop bought yeast, it's
If you
4 or 5
shop bought
days.
yeast, you'd probably be able to use it the next day, or if you did it in the morning, you might even be able to use it in the evening. But you'd probably wait overnight.
Okay, cool. Well done. Oh yeah.
And this is what it looks like. So that's that loaf we've just made.
Here's what I made earlier. How'd you do the cool top?
So we'll have a look at the cool top in a minute.
Oh, okay.
Job done.
Bye.